I knew something was wrong the moment I saw his face. My son Ethan stood beside his painting, 11 years old and rail-thin, his eyes scanning the crowded community center for some sign of approval. The art fair judges walked past his canvas without pausing, clipboards in hand, not even slowing their stride. I watched from across the room as Ethan's shoulders fell forward, his gaze dropping to the scuffed tile floor. And then I heard it, just loud enough to reach me through the crowd's murmur. A woman in an expensive blazer turned to her friend and said, "That's the boy whose father left. The one who lives in that apartment complex by the railroad tracks." I felt my throat tighten. My palms went clammy. I wanted to disappear and scream all at once. Instead, I stood frozen, watching my son's moment of pride dissolve into shame. My name is Olivia Rios. I'm 38 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been raising Ethan alone in a small town where everyone knows your business before you do. We live in Meadowbrook, Pennsylvania, the kind of place where your address determines your worth, and single mother still sounds like a failing grade to most people. Ethan's painting was extraordinary, not because I'm his mother and obligated to think so, but because it truly was. A sunset over water, but not the kind you'd expect from a child. No perfect orange circle, no triangular birds in the distance. His sunset was all emotion, dark blues and purples bleeding into fierce crimsons, the water beneath it turbulent and alive. He'd spent weeks on it, using techniques he taught himself from library books and YouTube videos we watched on my old laptop. When the school announced the regional art fair, Ethan had been hesitant. "Do you think I'm good enough, Mom?" he'd asked, his voice smaller than usual. The truth was, I didn't know. We couldn't afford art classes. His supplies came from discount stores and garage sales. But I'd seen how he lost himself in his art, how he'd sketch for hours with a focus that seemed impossible for most children his age. "Yes," I told him, with more confidence than I felt. "You absolutely are." So here we were. Ethan stood by his painting, wearing the one button-down shirt he owned, his hair combed neatly for once. I'd taken the afternoon off from my job at the insurance office, using precious vacation hours to be here. The judges had already passed by, not giving his work more than a cursory glance. Parents in tailored clothes clustered around other displays, where children described their private lessons and specialized techniques. We didn't belong here. I could feel it in the subtle ways people avoided eye contact, how conversations shifted when I approached. Ethan's painting stood in its lonely corner, beautiful and unseen. I started walking toward him, ready to suggest we leave early, get ice cream, pretend this afternoon hadn't mattered. But before I could reach him, someone else approached his painting. An older man, perhaps in his 70s, with silver hair and a weathered face. He wore simple clothes, khaki pants and a blue Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Paint stains dotted his hands and forearms. He stopped in front of Ethan's canvas and stood perfectly still, not the quick glance of the judges, not the polite pause of indifferent adults. He truly looked at the painting, leaning in close to examine brushstrokes, then stepping back to take in the full composition. Ethan watched him nervously, clutching the small stack of handouts he'd made explaining his work. The man hadn't spoken yet, hadn't even acknowledged Ethan's presence. He just studied the painting with an intensity that drew attention from nearby observers. I moved closer, protective instincts flaring, but something kept me from interrupting. The man's focus was so complete, so genuine. Finally, he turned to Ethan. "Did you paint this?" His voice was deep and quiet. Ethan nodded, handing him one of his carefully prepared handouts with trembling fingers. The man didn't take it. Instead, he asked, "What did you use for that effect in the water?" "The way the light seems to both reflect and penetrate the surface." Ethan blinked, surprised by the technical question. I layered thin washes of paint and then used the edge of a credit card to create the ripple patterns. "A credit card?" The man raised his eyebrows. "Mom's old library card." Actually, Ethan corrected himself. "And then I used my finger for the blurred sections." The man nodded slowly. "Resourceful. Inventive." He paused. "Masterful." By now, people had noticed the exchange. A small crowd began gathering around Ethan's previously ignored display. I recognized one of the judges, a woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper suit, trying to peer over shoulders. "My name is Robert Vieira," the man said, extending his hand to Ethan. My heart skipped a beat. Robert Vieira, the name was familiar even to me. He had been featured in the local paper last year when the Philadelphia Museum of Art acquired one of his paintings. Ethan's eyes widened. The Robert Vieira, who painted The Persistence of Weather? The man? Robert smiled, clearly surprised that an 11-year-old knew his work. You've seen it? Only online, Ethan admitted. Mom and I looked up famous Pennsylvania artists for my school project. I've watched all your technique videos. Robert's expression softened. He turned back to the painting, gesturing toward the horizon line. You understand something many trained artists never grasp. The edge between elements, where sky meets water, that's not where two things separate. It's where they connect. The judge with the sharp glasses had pushed her way forward. Mr. Vieira, she said, her tone suddenly deferential. We didn't know you were attending today. I wasn't planning to, he replied without looking away from Ethan's painting. My granddaughter's soccer game was canceled. Lucky coincidence. He turned to the judge. This young man's work, have you evaluated it yet? She fumbled with her clipboard. We've made an initial pass, but our final decisions aren't until. Look again, Robert said firmly. Really look. He gestured toward the canvas. The emotional maturity alone is remarkable. But technically, the composition, the brushwork, the understanding of light? He shook his head. I've taught graduate students who couldn't achieve this level of expression. The crowd had grown larger. Parents who had earlier steered their children away from our corner now pressed forward, straining to see what had captured Robert Vieira's attention. The judge examined the painting with new interest, making notes on her clipboard. Ethan stood straighter, his eyes darting between Robert, the growing audience, and me. I gave him a small nod, fighting back tears. Robert turned to Ethan again. Where do you take lessons? The dreaded question. I stepped forward, ready to intervene, to explain our circumstances, to apologize for what we couldn't provide. But Ethan spoke first. I don't take lessons. We can't. He paused, then lifted his chin slightly. I teach myself. From books and videos. Sometimes Mom sits with me while I paint. I expected pity to cross Robert's face. That familiar look adults get when they're about to offer charitable solutions. Instead, he nodded with what looked like genuine respect. Self-taught, he said thoughtfully. That explains the originality. No one telling you what's correct. He looked at me then. A warm acknowledgement. Sometimes the best thing we can do for young artists is to give them space and time. The judge cleared her throat. Mr. Vieira, would you be willing to say a few words to all our participants, perhaps share some insights about the importance of artistic development? Robert considered this, then nodded. I'd be happy to, but first. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to me. The university where I teach has a weekend program for exceptional young artists. Full scholarship, no auditions or applications necessary for nominees. I took the card, momentarily speechless. I'd like to nominate your son, he said simply. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Robert Vieira's endorsement clearly carried significant weight. She made another note on her clipboard, suddenly very interested in Ethan's information sheet. Robert returned his attention to Ethan. Would you be willing to explain your painting to the other students? Talk about your process, what inspired you? Ethan looked terrified at the prospect, but also thrilled. He glanced at me. You can do it, I whispered. And he did. Standing beside Robert Vieira, my son described how he'd been inspired by the evenings we spent at the public park near the train tracks, the only place in town with an unobstructed view of the sunset. He explained how he'd observed the water on different days, choppy, calm, reflecting clouds and light. He talked about mixing colors, about failed attempts and discoveries. The audience listened, really listened. I watched parents nudge their children forward to hear better. I saw the other judges taking notes. Most importantly, I saw Ethan speaking with growing confidence, his passion overcoming his nervousness. When the official program began, Robert gave his talk as promised, but instead of vague encouragements, he used specific examples from the displays, including Ethan's, to illustrate his points. True art, he said, doesn't come from privilege or perfect circumstances. It comes from observation, emotion, and the courage to express what you see in the world. By the end of the day, Ethan's painting had a blue ribbon attached to its frame, first place, middle school division. But more meaningful than the ribbon was the crowd of students who gathered around him, asking questions, admiring his work, inviting him to see theirs. As we packed up to leave, Robert approached us one last time. "The program starts in 3 weeks," he said. "Saturday mornings, I'll be teaching the first session." "I don't have a way to get there," Ethan said, his excitement dimming. The university was in Philadelphia, nearly an hour away by car. "We'll figure it out," I promised, though I wasn't sure how. Robert looked between us, understanding the unspoken challenge. "There's a train from Meadowbrook Station directly to campus," he said. "The program provides transit passes for students." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at our small kitchen table, already sketching ideas for new paintings. "Do you think Mr. Vieira really liked my work?" he asked for the 5th time, "or was he just being nice?" "Robert Vieira doesn't strike me as someone who says things he doesn't mean," I told him, placing a mug of hot chocolate beside his sketchbook. "The other kids' parents all knew who he was," Ethan said. "Melissa Chen's mom said he sells paintings for thousands of dollars. And he thought your work was exceptional," I reminded him. Ethan nodded, absorbing this. "Mom?" Today, when those judges walked past without looking at my painting, I thought maybe they were right, that I wasn't good enough. I sat down across from him. "Ethan, look at me." He did, his eyes so serious in his young face. "There will always be people who don't see your value, who look at where we live or our circumstances and make judgments, but that has nothing to do with your talent or who you really are." "But how do you keep going when people don't believe in you?" he asked. It was a question I'd asked myself countless times over the past 3 years. "You find the people who do," I said finally, "and you believe in yourself enough to keep creating until the right person notices." That was 6 months ago. Today, Ethan attends the weekend program at the university, where he's flourishing under Robert's mentorship. Robert connected me with the program administrator, who offered me a part-time position coordinating their community outreach efforts, a job I can do alongside my regular work, with flexible hours and better pay. We still live in the same apartment by the train tracks, but something fundamental has changed. Ethan walks differently now, head up, shoulders back. His art fills our small home, canvases stacked against walls, sketchbooks piled on every surface. He's been invited to display his work at the university student gallery next month. And me? I've learned something too. For years, I believed that success meant providing Ethan with everything he needed: the right neighborhood, the right opportunities, the right connections. I felt like a failure because I couldn't give him those things. But what he needed most wasn't a different zip code or expensive lessons. He needed someone to see him, truly see him, and believe in what they saw. Sometimes a single moment of recognition can change everything. Robert Vieira didn't change our lives by offering charity or pity. He changed our lives by paying attention, by recognizing talent in an unexpected place, and by using his influence to create opportunity. Not everyone has a Robert Vieira moment, but we all have the power to be that person for someone else, to look past circumstances and really see potential, to speak up when others are silent, to use whatever platform we have to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. As for Ethan, he still visits the park by the train tracks to watch the sunset. But now he brings other young artists from the program with him. "This is where I got my inspiration," I overheard him telling them. "Sometimes beautiful things come from unexpected places. And isn't that the truth? Sometimes the masterpieces come from the margins. Sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones we almost didn't hear. Sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to stop, look closely, and say, 'I see you. I see what you've created.' And it matters." If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, or if you've been the one who stopped to notice what others missed, share your experience. Remember that recognition is a gift we can all give, and sometimes it's the most valuable thing in the world. Thank you for reading. Thank you for seeing. And most of all, thank you for believing that every voice, every creation, every person deserves to be truly seen.